Joining us, MS Now reporter Alex Tabbitt. He's in Florida, where their maps just got approved today. Senior editor at Slate and MS Now law and politics analyst Dahlia Lithwick, and former New York congressman and senior advisor at VoteVets Max Rose. So, Dahlia, it's kind of a confusing decision, and I hope you'll walk me through it, because what they did here is say you can't gerrymander on race, but you can gerrymander on politics, on partisanship. How do you separate those two things out when the gerrymander on race in a lot of those districts meant that you were gerrymandering a Democratic district?
I mean, the court a few years ago held that partisan political gerrymanders were, in their words, non-justiciable. So that was already established. There was this lingering question, Katie, which was, what about racial gerrymanders? And today the court said, effectively, whatever is left of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, and let's be really clear, when the court decided Shelby County, right, the eviscerating Section 5, the big guts of the Voting Rights Act, they said, don't worry, you can always use Section 2 to effectuate, the rights of minority voters. So they did away with Section 2, or what's left of Section 2. And you're exactly right. Now that the court has said you can go ahead and do partisan political gerrymanders, that's now good law. Also, the standard for determining whether there's been a racial gerrymander under Section 2 is now so high as to be effectively unmeetable. So they've taken whatever teeth were left out of Section 2. So now I think what you're going to see is, and Justice Kagan makes this point in her dissent, the two combined mean that open season on all gerrymandering forever.
So basically, if a state legislature can prove that they are redrawing the maps based on partisanship, I want more Republicans, and they can look at these congressional districts that are majority-minority, majority black districts, majority Latino districts, whatever, and say, you know what, they all vote Democrat. I don't want them to be able to all vote Democrat. I want a Republican in there. Their race no longer matters?
Right. That's what this did. It effectively said that the protection was that you couldn't do a racial gerrymander, but now that's gone. So essentially what the court is saying is, particularly throughout the South, where voting correlates so highly to a political party, there's just no way anymore you're going to be able to prove that a gerrymander violates the Constitution.
What did Elena Kagan say in her dissent?
Oh, she was as biting and as frustrated as she gets. And this is she and Justice Alito have locked horns in prior cases on these same exact issues. And she essentially says in her dissent that just call it what it is. You can't say Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act survives to see another day when you've made it absolutely impossible to meet whatever this mythical new standard is. And she is really at pains to sort of go through the history of why the Voting Rights Act exists, why the 14th and 15th Amendment exists, why these laws were put into place, and why they were not just affirmed and reaffirmed in the courts, but also reauthorized by Congress, who also gets kneecapped today. And her frustration, the sense that this is just an utterly dead letter is the word she uses. Just call it what it is, she says, and yet the majority opinion, the 6-3 on perfectly political lines opinion, won't even do that.
Yeah, and there's arguments now the Supreme Court has been writing law in a lot of these decisions. All right, Alex, take me to Florida. Florida is a state that has just redrawn its maps. Those maps were just approved. But there is some tension in Florida because some Republican lawmakers are worried that this new version of the maps is going to dilute their districts at a time when Republicans aren't as popular as they were maybe 6 months ago.
That's right, Katie. And this new map is all but approved. It just passed the State House, the State Senate, and it's just waiting the signature of Governor Ron DeSantis. But of course, he proposed this map, so it's just basically a foregone conclusion that it will be signed momentarily. As for what this map does, right now in Florida, you've got 28 congressional districts, 20 of them controlled by Republicans, 7 Democrats, 1 vacancy that used to be controlled by a Democrat. This is going to flip 4 congressional districts, in theory, if voting trends continue for the Republicans. And the reason that's so controversial, Katie, is, as you and I both know, Florida's a red state, but it's not that red of a state that 24 of the 28 congressional districts should be controlled by Republicans. 56% of the voters here voted for President Trump in 2024 compared to 43% for Harris. There's 4 million registered Democrats compared to 5.5 million Republicans. So it's just not it's just a disproportionate representation for Democrats here in this state. Now, you point out the fact that there is some worry, some anxiety here among some Republicans in Florida that potentially this new map dilutes some Republican representation in South Florida. But if voting trends continue the way that many experts can expect them to, a lot of people here believe that actually will advantage the Republicans. That's what makes it so controversial. It's another Sorry, Katie.
No, go ahead. Finish.
Another thing that makes this pretty controversial is that in 2010, Floridians voted on the Fair Districts Amendment. It's basically a constitutional amendment that bans partisan gerrymandering and protects minority groups here in Florida when you draw new maps. So there is definitely going to be a lot of legal challenges to this new map. At the same time, Katie, here in Florida, there's 7 members of the Florida Supreme Court. 6 of them have been appointed by Governor Ron DeSantis. The 7th was appointed by a different Republican governor. So a lot of the Democrats here are a little bit cynical that legal challenges will actually mount anything.
So,
Katie,
the reason I'm smirking here is I remember not too long ago that all of the experts said that, when Obama was elected, the new coalition and the way the demographics in this country were changing, Republicans were never going to be elected again. Never. It's never going to happen. And then Donald Trump came along. So all of the turmoil that Democrats might be feeling now about a permanency of Republican leadership, I treat that with some skepticism because voters do change their minds, maybe not as quickly as some people want them to, but sometimes it can come out of nowhere. And Republicans have been unpopular over these last few months. Donald Trump has his poll numbers aren't good, Max.
There's nothing like putting us into a reckless, unconstitutional war to sink your poll numbers. But as Leader Jeffries comments on the Texas redistricting, it became a dummy mander. Right? You're going to see they thought that they were making Republican districts, and in order to make another Republican district, you have to make more seats competitive. Democrats are going to win some seats that they never thought were actually in play. These Republicans are so unpopular. But I'll tell you one thing that they can't gerrymander. They can't gerrymander the state as a whole. Florida is in play. Alex Vindman can win that Senate seat. The governor's race in Florida is in play. And there's absolutely nothing that the state legislature can do in terms of these backdoor politics to fix that.
So are you hopeful about the future, or are you feeling a little bit of doom and gloom?
I'm in perpetual doom and gloom.
I'm
a fourth-generation Jewish.
Just because you need to take a ferry or a bridge to get to the rest of the city doesn't mean you have to be doom and gloom.
Pessimistic. But here's what I would say. If you look at the numbers right now, when it comes to declining popularity for Republicans, the only way those numbers become reality is if their base is hemorrhaging, which means that if they don't try to excite their base, they are going to stay home. And in their act of trying to excite their base, they are going to lose independence. So they are in an awful pickle. And in the face of that, Democrats certainly need to remain forthright, but also, God forbid, some discipline would kill them right now.
Never want to get into a pickle. Not a good thing.
No.